Hello there. 30 years ago, in a small village located in the mountains of Hanshan, Xianzhong District, Anhui Province, although it was situated at a high position, the land there was very flat. There was a village surrounded by mountains and rivers, and some hilly areas had been converted into terraced fields by the local people. On the 4th day of June, 1990, when a young man went fishing with a group of friends in a nearby village throughout the night, upon returning home he carried a basket of fish and knocked on the door. However, after calling for a few minutes with no one opening the door, he guessed that everyone in the house had gone to the fields to work or were sound asleep and thus couldn't hear his calls. The young man decided to put the basket of fish on the yard and try to go around to the side entrance of the house that led to the kitchen area to call again. However, as he approached, he discovered that this side entrance was slightly ajar. Seeing the door slightly open, he pushed it and stepped inside. Just a few steps in, he was shocked to witness a horrifying scene. The house was in disarray, with belongings scattered around and blood splattered everywhere. On the floor of the house, his mother and younger sister lay side by side, both of them brutally attacked, and covered in major wounds with blood staining their clothes. His father, Mr. Tu Yuan, lay motionless on the bed on a mattress soaked with blood. Regaining his composure, he immediately grabbed the phone and called the police. Upon arrival at the scene, they conducted an investigation and confirmed that all 3 victims had died several hours before. The perpetrator had used a sharp object identified as a cleaver to carry out the attack, as the wounds were lacerations, causing extensive bleeding, but not as sharp as a knife or other weapons. Particularly the male victim, Mr. Tu Yuan, 48 years old, had a severe chop wound on his skull, causing it to crack and visibly deform on one side. This indicated that the perpetrator had attacked him first, causing his immediate death while he was sleeping on the bed. As for the 2 female victims, the 46-year-old mother was found collapsed about 3 meters away from where her husband lay. She was lying on her side with her hand covering a wound on her neck, and there were bloodstains trailing on the floor and clothes. This suggested that after being attacked, the woman was still alive and had tried to crawl out and seek help, but due to excessive blood loss, she collapsed on the spot. The remaining female victim was Tungo Li, a 20-year-old girl with multiple major wounds on her head, shoulders, and abdomen. Her body was found face down on the ground with her head almost severed. It appeared that she was the last victim to be attacked, and the perpetrator seemed to have unleashed their vengeance on the young victim's body. Li had over 20 chop wounds on her body, and there were long tears on the palms of her hands, indicating that she had tried to resist and grab the perpetrator's cleaver. The location of this victim's death was close to where the bloodstains began on the house floor. From that position, the police deduced that she had struggled with the perpetrator when he attacked her mother and then shifted to attacking Li. It might be the reason why she had fewer wounds and was the last one to die. The belongings inside the house were not only searched but also vandalized, scattered on the floor. Fortunately, Tudung, the eldest son, was not present during the night of the incident, so he survived. The police asked Dung to take inventory of the family's belongings to gather more investigative information. Dung also discovered that all the closets in the house had been destroyed, and anything of value had been taken. Even the newly purchased clothes in the closet were taken by the perpetrator. The level of brutal attack and the killing of all 3 individuals indicated that if it had been a robbery, it wasn't very reasonable, because this family had an average economic status and didn't possess many valuables. Moreover, all the members of the family were still young and healthy, and Mr. and Mrs. Tu were not even 50 years old. If this was an act of personal revenge, it was rare for the perpetrator to take away all the valuable items at the crime scene. However, the fact that the perpetrator knew the exact location of valuable belongings in the house indicates that he must be familiar with the victim's family. This murder case has shaken the peaceful village, especially because the perpetrator cruelly killed 3 people in just one night. When the police asked Dung if he suspected anyone in committing this crime, he remained silent, and after a few seconds, without hesitation, he said that a man named Liang Guang was the culprit. Subsequently, the police continued their investigation at the crime scene, while another group of police quickly arrived at Liang Guang's house. Upon arrival, they found no one inside the house, but the murder weapon was discovered right in the yard. It was a blood-stained axe, indicating that the perpetrator decided to leave traces of the crime after committing it. Inside the house, the police found blood-soaked clothing discarded under the floor, which was the outfit that the perpetrator wore when killing the victims. They also found some other belongings of the victim's family in the house, indicating that the perpetrator must have fled in haste and could not take all of these items. So what was the motive and grudge between Liang Guang and Mr. Tu's family that led him to commit such a brutal act? In fact, not long before Liang Guang was the son-in-law of Mr. Tu's family. He married Li through a matchmaker. and originally Li did not have much affection for Guang. However, partly due to Li's parents' coercion as her older brother Deng had reached the age of marriage, but the family was poor and could not afford the wedding expenses. So Mr. and Mrs. Tu came up with the idea of marrying their daughter to obtain money. Li agreed to this suggestion from her parents so that her older brother could have money to get married soon. However, after the marriage, Li and Guang frequently had conflicts and arguments due to various issues in their life. Each time, Guang would brutally beat Li to the point where she had to be hospitalized. After recovering each time, Li suggested a breakup, but Guang refused, so she unilaterally filed for divorce in April 1990. However, this tragic marriage only lasted a few months. Guang, with his irritable and dictatorial temperament after the divorce, repeatedly came to Li's house to curse Mr. and Mrs. Tu and his ex-wife. Moreover, he had an unpredictable and rude nature, and he had threatened to kill the entire family several times. He even drunkenly threw stones and sticks at Mr. Tu's gate despite being warned once. Due to these behaviors, families with daughters in the village avoided Guang, and upon learning this, he became even more resentful and believed that his ex-wife's family had slandered him, making it impossible for him to find a wife. The climax occurred a month before the heinous crime when he went to his ex-wife's house to demand the return of the dowry money. Guang believed that Li's family had deceived him in a marriage that lasted only a few months, but he had to pay a large sum of money for the wedding, which he considered unfair. The marriage had ended, and he wanted to retrieve the dowry money that Li's parents had received in the past. To avoid complications and family troubles, Li's family gave the dowry money for their son's engagement to him. Their eldest son was also about to get married, but there was no money left in the house, so Mr. and Mrs. Tu had to borrow from relatives and acquaintances. In the end, they'd paid off the previous dowry money, but Guang still frequently visited the house to curse and insult his ex-wife's family. When the police searched Guang's house, they did not find any cash, but they did find the dowry items that Guang had previously purchased to send to his ex-wife's family. Some of the assets that were divided for Li during the divorce trial were also found in Guang's house. This incident happened in 1990, over 30 years ago, when life was still difficult and backward. During the divorce process, the court divided not only the bed, curtains, pot, and other personal belongings, unlike today. At Liang Guang's house, the police also found a blood-stained curtain, which means that after killing the victims, he removed the curtain from the bed where he killed them and brought it home. This action is perplexing and demonstrates the extent of his greed. Not only that, but the divorce confirmation paper from the court and the victim's blood were also found in his kitchen. These things were definitely brought by Guang from his ex-wife's house after committing the crime. With such clear evidence, the police's immediate task now is to arrest Liang Guang. However, unfortunately, he quickly fled the village that night. Despite the police's efforts such as offering a reward and sending notices and the suspect's images to neighboring provinces, he could not be found. In the following years, the police tried to locate Guang's hiding place by secretly monitoring his family. However, he did not contact his family and seemed to have disappeared from this life. Over 30 years have passed since the incident, and there have been no new developments in the case. However, with the advancement of criminal investigation technology in recent years, the police's methods of solving crimes have become more sophisticated. Starting from 2020, the Hanshan Police Department decided to reopen the investigation into this heinous crime. The latest investigative method is the use of facial recognition based on the national database since October 2020. After months of comparing information, the Yiwu City Police Department in Zhejiang Province sent a notification to the Xianzhong District Police Department stating that they had discovered a person named Mao. He used to live and work in Yiwu City and bears a strong resemblance to the suspect. The registration information shows that this person's name is Hongyan Mao, originally from Jiangxi Province. It has been over 30 years since the incident, and no one knows for sure whether Liang Guang is still alive or dead. Therefore, when looking at the report and the images sent from Yiwu City, the Hanshan Police Department cannot determine whether this photograph is of the suspect or not. Because since Guang's escape, he would be over 50 years old, and his appearance has likely changed significantly. Upon receiving the report, the Hanshan Police Department could only send an investigation team to Zhejiang to verify this case. When they arrived in Yiwu City, the Hanshan Police learned that the photograph of Hongyan Mao was actually taken 6 years ago, around 2014. The purpose of taking this photo was to apply for temporary residence in Yiwu City. The police tracked down the house that Hongyan Mao rented, and the landlord informed them that Mao was around 50 years old at that time and was not living alone, but with his wife, son, daughter-in-law, and 2 grandchildren. They were a family of 6. However, by the end of 2014, the landlord lost contact with them and did not know where they had gone. The police continued their investigation and found that Hongyan Mao had no temporary residence records in Yiwu City after 2014. The question remained, where did the suspect Liang Guang go after leaving that house? To further investigate, the police obtained the household registration information of a person named Hongyan Mao. However, they realized that the photo in the national database's household registration was identical to the photo on the temporary residence permit. This suggests that the temporary residence registration may have been using the identity of Hongyan Mao by the suspect Liang Guang to live in Yiwu City, Zhejiang Province. The suspicion that this man used someone else's information to register for temporary residence becomes even clearer, but nobody knows where he has gone. It's possible that he is using someone else's identity, making it challenging to investigate in this direction. Based on the previous investigation, this man had lived with his family in Yiwu. The police began to recheck the temporary residence registrations of the people living with him in order to search for clues. They hoped that among these individuals there would be a close connection to the suspect and they could find the person who had used this fake identity. Eventually, they discovered the identities of two other individuals, a middle-aged woman known as Wu Hian and her son. The special investigation team conducted inquiries in Shangnian District, Jiangxi Province, where Wu Hian's household registration was. This time, they uncovered a suspicious truth that Wu Hian was the wife of Hongyan Mao, but not the one impersonated by the suspect. Based on the accounts of the villagers, they learned that years ago, Hian had fled with another man who was not Mao. Meanwhile, Mao still lived in the village. Once again, we turn back in time to the 1990s, in a small village located in the mountainous region of Shangnian District, Jiangxi Province. In the early morning, the villagers went to the nearby town for trading just like any other day. While Hongyan Mao and his wife were on their way to go shopping, they coincidentally encountered Mao's older brother begging at a marketplace. Mao's older brother had no stable occupation to support his family. He often wandered from one place to another to make a living. Whenever he wasn't welcomed in a particular area, he would move to another region to continue his life, relying on the compassion of others. This time he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by another beggar. What was peculiar was that this man spoke with a different regional accent which piqued Mao's curiosity. The man revealed that his surname was Li, and that he was a wanderer from elsewhere. The two men happened to meet while seeking a place to sleep in a temple, and from then on they became friends and begged together. Mao and his wife saw the man named Li wearing a large tattered cloth bag in front of his chest to hold personal belongings and a few dried items like dirty torn clothes. However, despite his unattractive appearance, he had a robust and healthy physique, seemingly capable of performing strenuous tasks. Therefore, the couple decided to bring Li to their home and let him work on their field to compensate for his food and lodging expenses. Initially, Mao and his wife were delighted to have an additional person helping their family, but they didn't anticipate that the arrival of this man would bring shocking upheavals to their household. At first, Li Tu seemed gentle and obedient, but after a while, rumors and gossip about the relationship between Li Tu and Mao's wife spread throughout the village. Shortly thereafter, Li Tu left the village with Wu Hian to live together. This information delighted the police because the man named Li Tu bore many similarities to the man they were searching for. The police showed the villagers a picture of Liang Guang, and they immediately recognized him. With the valuable information gathered, the police became quite confident that the man who initially called himself Li Tu was in fact Liang Guang, the cold-blooded murderer they had been searching for over 30 years. Finally, they had a lead from this breakthrough. So where did Liang Guang go after leaving Yiwu in 2014? According to the villagers' recollections, after years of leaving the village, Wu Hian and her son Hong Fei suddenly returned to the village at the end of 2014, bringing 2 children with them. Subsequently, Hian took care of the grandchildren, while Hong Fei continued to work in Jiangxi Province to send money back to support his own child. Therefore, the sudden disappearance of Liang Guang in late 2014, along with the return of Wu Hian and Hong Fei to the village, raised suspicions. After checking and not finding any specific information about Liang Guang after 2014, the investigation team decided to approach Wu Hian and Hong Fei because they had lived together with Guang. When the police arrived at Wu Hian's house, she admitted that she had lived with Guang for many years, but he never revealed his real name, and Hian always called him Li Tu. Hong Fei, who was working in Jiangxi Province, gave a similar statement. Both of them stated that they had lived with Liang Guang in Yiwu, Zhejiang. However, when it came to the most important question about Guang's whereabouts, after 2014, the testimonies of Wu Hian and Hong Fei began to show significant discrepancies. Wu Hian said that on a day in 2014, after an argument with Liang Guang about family issues, he angrily left. However, Fei claimed that Liang Guang unexpectedly left without any argument or conflict. The difference in their statements may seem to indicate that there was a hidden secret. After the meeting, the police carefully planned the next interrogation with Wu Hian and Fei in the interrogation room. After several questions, Hien finally revealed information about Liang Guang. She stated that Liang Guang had been beaten to death by Fei. The police were surprised by Hien's confession and questioned whether it was true. Why would someone as cruel as Liang Guang be killed? The police investigated Fei as a suspect, but he remained calm and seemed not to be the perpetrator of the serious crime in this household 6 years ago. He recounted that one evening at the end of the 2014, the entire family of 6 was having dinner at the dining table when Fei's 3-year-old child accidentally dropped food on the table. Liang Guang struck the child's head forcefully with a chopstick, causing the child to cry in pain. Seeing his child being hit like that, anger surged within Fei. He didn't react but took the child outside while consoling them. Wu Hien, witnessing her grandson being hurt by Liang Guang, also felt unhappy and voiced her opinion. However, Liang Guang responded with defiance and threatened to kill the whole family. Furthermore, he mentioned that he had killed 4 people in the past and could kill a few more without any consequences. Liang Guang's acts of physical abuse and threats towards Fei's family had occurred multiple times. Ever since he appeared, he had brought nothing but tragedy and suffering to this family. Hong Fei recalled when he was very young, Liang Guang was a hired worker for the family, and rumors of an affair between his mother and Liang Guang began to spread in the village. Fei recounted, "My mother went to harvest rice and my father stayed at home while Liang Guang went with her. In the summertime, the mornings were early and hot, so they would wake up around 5 a.m. and go to the field together. There was one time when people in the village caught them doing something inappropriate right in the middle of the field. After that shameful incident was discovered, Liang Guang and Wu Hien left the city of Jiangxi. Since he was young, Fei had lived in secrecy and loneliness during his school days because his friends often mocked him, saying that his mother had an affair and ran away with a beggar. Hong Fei dropped out of school and worked as a construction worker. Later, he got married and had a child. After growing up, he and his wife had to work hard to support their child because there was no one to take care of them. Many years passed without seeing his mother, so he went to Yiwu to live with her. However, at this time, Hien was still living with Liang Guang and had to face a harsh life. Once again, Fei had to live with Guang and accept the fact that he was impersonating his biological father. For Fei, this man had made his childhood incomplete and filled his mind with hatred. Liang Guang had no stable job and lived by deceiving and pickpocketing people. Guang, a hot-tempered and rude person who enjoyed bullying others, had an incident that happened in front of many people. Wu Hien had never thought of leaving Liang Guang because he constantly threatened to kill her. Guang half-jokingly mentioned that he had killed several people and was not afraid to kill more. Fei, who always worried about his wife and children, couldn't do anything in the face of Liang Guang's threats. However, unexpectedly, Fei's tolerance led to an even worse and more shameful incident. Guang always had his eyes on Fei's wife and had harassed her on several occasions. At the end of 2014, after a near-miss incident of his wife being assaulted, Fei felt humiliated and unable to bear it any longer, so he decided to leave. Looking back at the damages that Liang Guang had caused to the family over the years, Fei's heart was filled with revengeful intentions. A week after his wife left one evening, Hong Fei couldn't sleep due to anger, so he sneaked into Liang Guang's room and repeatedly struck him on the head with a hammer. Wu Hien, his lover who was lying next to Liang Guang, tried to intervene hastily, but Fei claimed that he had no intention of killing Liang Guang at that moment, only wanting to vent his anger by hitting him. After his mother intervened, Fei immediately went out to drink alcohol all night. However, when he returned the next morning, he was terrified to discover that Guang had died. The following night, Hong Fei dismembered Liang Guang's body into small pieces and put them into woven bags. He then used a motorcycle to transport the corpses and headed towards the outskirts. After driving for over an hour, he arrived at a desolate area and dug a hole to dump the bags of corpses there, quickly covering them with soil before leaving. Currently, the search for Liang Guang's remains has become the top priority for the police based on Hong Fei's instructions. However, when they arrived at the scene after 6 years, the area had changed significantly, with part of it turning into a garbage dump. Hong Fei could not accurately determine the location because he was extremely frightened when he secretly buried the body here in the middle of the night, in the darkness, afraid of being discovered. Therefore, the police summoned 2 excavators to the location provided by Hong Fei to conduct excavation over an extensive area of hundreds of square meters. Fortunately, just after 3 days and 3 nights, the search team found the bags containing the remains. After conducting DNA tests, the results confirmed that the body was indeed that of Liang Guang, the murderer who had evaded capture for 30 years. The forensic report revealed that Liang Guang died from serious injuries caused by a sharp, round, solid object. The main wounds were on the front of the head and forehead, resulting in fractures and brain hemorrhage. These injuries were entirely consistent with Hong Fei's confession that he had attacked Guang with a hammer while he was sleeping. Although verifying the truth of this confession was challenging, Hong Fei's confession was still given significant consideration in the case and received support from the online community. Based on the forensic report and Fei's confession, he was only indicted for intentionally causing injury and leading to death. However, there is no information about the outcome of this case, and no one knows what punishment he received. No one could have anticipated that this 30-year-old case would have such an ending, making it one of the most bizarre and surprising criminal cases in the history of China. Everyone has their own perspective on whether the retribution was justified for Liang Guang, but in terms of his character, he was truly terrible. This stemmed from him killing his ex-wife's family. Despite demanding the entire dowry after their divorce, he couldn't find anyone to marry him because of his wicked and cruel nature. He constantly insulted his ex-wife's family after the failed marriage, but always blamed his ex-wife for speaking ill of him and sought cruel revenge by killing all 3 victims. Liang Guang blamed external reasons without realizing that the main subjective reason was himself. His ex-wife truly did deserve sympathy. She was a victim not only in the murder case, but also within her own family. Her parents forced her to marry Liang Guang in order to collect the wedding money for her older brother. This incident is like sacrificing the life of a daughter to ensure the happiness of the family's male heir. It reflects a deeply ingrained mindset of male superiority and female inferiority that has existed in rural China for many years. Finally, after over 30 years, the murder case has been resolved and Hong Fei paid the price for his decision to commit murder. However, the crimes that Fei had to face left many feeling regretful and sympathetic. A police officer recounted during Fei's interrogation about the murder where the young man repeatedly buried his face in his hands and choked out, "Why didn't you come earlier? Why?" This left the investigators with a heavy heart. They said, "If only we had discovered Liang Guang's temporary residence registration earlier to apprehend him, Hong Fei wouldn't have been pushed to commit the murder." Unfortunately, life doesn't have any what-ifs. Hong Fei still had to take responsibility for his wrongdoings just like anyone else in life. Every decision we make directly influences what will happen in the future. In life, there are people who have positive and optimistic thinking, and there are also those who always have negative thoughts. The negative individuals may have experienced a lot of suffering with all the misfortunes and frustrations of the world weighing on them. Their extreme mindset makes them believe that everyone else is deceitful, hypocritical, and even suspect others of unjustly harming them. Have you ever encountered people like that? It's also a form of psychological disorder. Let's listen to this story together. On the morning of June 30th, 2013, a middle-aged man called the Tangshan City Police in Hebei Province to report that his wife named Wang Anqui, who worked as a laborer in a pottery factory, had been missing for 5 days. He stated that the day of her disappearance was June 25th, when Ku returned from her mother-in-law's house to borrow the household registration book in order to enroll her eldest son in school. The brother-in-law and Kue's birth parents had searched the places she often visited, but found no trace of her. Furthermore, they were unable to contact Ku, as she always kept her phone turned off, which was unusual. After waiting for 5 days, they decided to call the police to report Kue's mysterious disappearance. The Tangshan police arrived at the victim's house to initiate an investigation and gather information about the missing person. When they arrived, they found Wang Anqui living in a makeshift house surrounded by overgrown grass with only a small concrete path leading to the house. The police had to deploy search dogs. Based on Ko's old belongings, the police discovered a stick and her clothes discarded haphazardly in a nearby abandoned grassland about 500 meters away from her house. Additionally, they found a thin blanket stained with blood hanging on a tree. Although Key had not been found yet, the presence of her personal belongings and bloodstains indicated that something untoward had happened to her. The police collected information from Wang Anqi's family. Firstly, they learned that on June 25th, Q returned home to borrow the household registration book for her eldest son's enrollment in first grade. This child is the son of her first husband, and currently both the mother and son are living together with her second husband's family. After Ku took the household registration book, the family was unable to contact her. Key's parents also mentioned that after more than a day without contact, they went to her mother-in-law's house to inquire about her whereabouts and were informed by her mother-in-law that Q had gone on a short trip a few days ago. She took some personal belongings and a thin blanket to avoid getting cold. When the police obtained information from Q's family, they found out that on the evening of June 25th, her husband also couldn't reach her. He asked his mother if she knew where Kui had gone, and his mother said that Kui had packed her clothes and mentioned going on a trip. Although Kui's actions and schedule seemed very strange, the family wasn't overly worried because she was a mature, quick-witted, and lively woman. 2 days after Q disappeared, her co-workers went to her house and asked why she hadn't shown up for work. It was then that the family discovered something unusual, because the pottery factory where she worked had a special attendance bonus. When Ki received her full monthly wages, the attendance bonus amounted to about 50 yuan. Although it wasn't a large sum, it held special significance for Kui, who was in difficult circumstances. In the first 5 months of 2013, she consistently received this bonus. Wang Anqi had never received her salary without the attendance bonus. When listening to her family talk about her co-worker's trip, she was informed that the company hadn't organized any travel recently. So if she was traveling alone, why did she turn off her mobile phone? It's possible that initially Kay was outside and her phone ran out of battery, but would she really not charge it and turn it back on for 5 consecutive days? Another unusual thing that the police discovered was that Wang Anqi didn't live with her husband. Instead, she and her son lived with her mother-in-law, while her husband was living with his sister in a different house. The most confusing aspect is that it's normal for a woman to live with her mother-in-law and her husband's family after marriage. However, if the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law live together in one house while the brother and sister live together, that's something hard to understand. This perplexed the police. A neighbor recounted that Wang Anque's husband and his sister were living together. This sister, named Lan Qi, 43 years old, had gone through an unhappy married life, and after divorcing, she had been living with her younger brother's family in this apartment for about 2 months before Kue went missing. In March 2013, a major conflict occurred between these two women, and the reason was that Kue went to work and left their young child at her mother-in-law's house. On an afternoon after picking up her child and returning home, Kay intended to cook while taking care of her child. However, when she arrived home, the door was locked from the inside and she couldn't open it. Knowing that Lan Qi was inside, Kay knocked on the door and called her to open it. Kay and her young child stood outside for nearly half an hour, knocking on the door and calling Lan Qi's phone. Even the neighbors came to help Kay, but Lan Qi didn't open the door or answer the phone. After some time, Lan Qi finally opened the door and said that she had fallen asleep and didn't hear Kue calling. Kue was furious because Lan Qi, as the homeowner, had locked the door from the inside, trapping herself outside. Lan Qi believed that Wang Anqi was being too confrontational, and both sides engaged in a physical altercation, scratching and pulling each other, which required the intervention of the neighbors. Kay was uncomfortable with her husband's sister staying in her house for an extended period, and she believed that Lan Qi should find her own place to live after the divorce. They had several conflicts regarding household matters. Furthermore, Lan Qi didn't take care of the child or cook. She only came to the house to hang out, and Kay took care of all the household chores. Kui's husband, Zhao Liang, didn't step in to resolve the conflicts either. Due to these conflicts, the relationship between Kui and Lan Qi had completely deteriorated, and they stopped talking to each other. After a few days, Kui became angry because her son had to live with her mother-in-law in her house. According to colleagues and neighbors, the relationship between the mother-in-law and Kui was very good. However, this apartment had a moisture problem, so there were many mosquitoes, which caused Kui and Liang's son, who was just under 2 years old, to continuously get bitten and fall sick. Wang Anqi also didn't want to return to the previous apartment because she felt uncomfortable there. When they bought this apartment, Kui and her husband were short on money, so they borrowed 20,000 yuan from Lan Qi. They had already paid back half of the amount, leaving them with a debt of 10,000 yuan. Kui said she would save her salary for the next 6 months to repay it, but Lan Qi disagreed. She would only agree to move out when Wang Anqi fully paid back the debt, and she claimed that she had the right to stay because she had contributed the money. Furthermore, there was something strange about Zhao Liang, the husband of the missing person. He remained indifferent even after Kui's wife and son came to live with his mother for 2 months, and he continued to live peacefully with his sister in the house. Even 5 days after his wife went missing, he didn't report it to the police, while Qi's colleagues had come to search for her just 2 days after her disappearance. Until the Wang Anqi family came to discover the strange stories within this family, the mother-in-law, Ma Chi-kai, began to reveal a secret after being questioned by the police. She said that Wang Anqi had a vague relationship with a male colleague in the company. Because they were colleagues, they had more contact time, and Ma Chi-kai often saw Kui texting someone else. She suspected that this man and Kui had left together. Ma Chi-kai knew about her daughter-in-law's affair, but due to the difficult family circumstances and Wang Anqi's recent marriage, she didn't want her son to fall into such a situation. Therefore, she advised Kui to stay by her son's side and be cautious of unhealthy relationships. In the eyes of the husband's family, the suspicion towards Kui was not only based on habits, but also on the stories told by the neighbors. The police knew that Wang Anqi liked to use a mobile phone for online conversations and frequently held the phone even when she was supposed to rest after giving birth. Keo's mother-in-law also revealed that living with her had caused a near separation between her and Zhao Liang for the past 2 months. During that time, Ma Chi-kai had seen a tall young man picking her up from work 3 times and quickly leaving. Kei had told Ma Chi-kai that she felt disappointed because Zhao Liang lacked capability, money, and refused to buy a car. Zhao Liang had been questioned by the police, but his attitude towards his ex-wife was also difficult to predict. Ma Chi-kai said that Liang had returned after a few days and faced a guilty conscience after hearing from his mother about the unacceptable things concerning his wife for the past 2 months. On that day, the couple had a heated argument, and in anger, Liang accidentally damaged Kuo's mobile phone when he discovered she was spending too much time on it. Kuo's husband felt that she was not happy living with his family because they were facing financial pressure and conflicts among the members. Therefore, he believed it was entirely possible for Wang Anqui to have left with another man. Zhao Liang's older sister also mentioned that Kui seemed insincere and unstable in family life. She also believed that Wang Anqui leaving with another man was only a matter of time. These things made the husband's family suspect and worry about Kui's behavior, which is why they suspected her disappearance without reporting it to the police. However, contrary to the husband's family's thoughts, Kui's biological parents stated that despite being 11 years younger than her husband, she still took good care of the family and their son after marriage. Furthermore, in the eyes of Kui's colleagues, she was a caring person who worked diligently, honestly, and spoke little. No one in the Wang Anqui family believed that she had abandoned her 2 sons to follow another man, and even her colleagues did not believe this. After a one-day investigation by the police, they concluded that the possibility of Wang Anqui leaving home with someone else was very low. Q had gone to her birth mother's house on June 25th to obtain the household registration book and register her son for 1st grade. Therefore, it was impossible for her to suddenly leave the next day. Moreover, the man mentioned by Q's mother-in-law had no suspicious relationship with her and was merely a colleague. The police also found no traces of this person's existence after checking information from hospitals and Wang Anqui's social media. The colleagues also confirmed that Q had no intimate relationship with any man in the company. The hypothesis that Wang Anqui had left with someone else was eliminated. However, if Kui didn't leave, then where did she go? Currently, the DNA testing from the bloodstain on the cloth has no results. Kui's disappearance and her personal belongings were found scattered in the abandoned grassy area behind the house. Therefore, the police suspect that Wang Anqui encountered an unfortunate event based on their investigative experience. On that day, an investigative team discovered a large white woven bag that appeared to be freshly discarded. After opening the bag, the police found it contained the lower torso of a female body. Continuing the search, they found another bag containing the remaining body parts. Upon forensic examination and facial recognition, the police identified the victim as Wang Anqui. The estimated time of death was approximately 5 days prior, between the night of June 25th and the morning of June 26th. The victim's body exhibited multiple wounds caused by a sharp object, including significant injuries to the head and face, with a fatal wound being a slash on the neck. Based on the forensic analysis of the wounds, it was determined that a kitchen cleaver-type knife was used. Wang Anqui was murdered, and the perpetrator had dismembered the body to facilitate disposal. So who killed Wang Anqui? It is possible that she was attacked unexpectedly by a stranger or murdered by individuals within her husband's family. Although there were several conflicts with her fingerprint examinations on the items found at the crime scene did not reveal any fingerprints of a stranger. This raises the question of whether the perpetrator was a stranger who wore gloves during the crime or someone within Wang Anqui's family. If the perpetrator was a random attacker, what could have been their motive? During the investigation, the police focused on various leads, including the victim's husband's family. Despite some suspicions surrounding Mrs. K, their relationship was confirmed to be good. Ma Chi-kai, an elderly woman with white hair, and Wang Anqui, a young and healthy woman measuring 1.6 meters tall and weighing 60 kilograms. With such strength, it would be difficult for a petite 60-year-old woman weighing only around 40 kilograms to physically overpower and kill a nimble young woman like Wang Anqui, even with a knife. The police gathered information and learned that there was always tension between Kay and Lan Qi, her sister-in-law. Lan Qi often criticized and belittled Kui, and they had disagreements regarding their living arrangements. This conflict had been ongoing before Kay went missing on June 25th. Neighbors in the apartment building reported seeing Kay at Lan Qi's apartment on the 25th, and Lan Qi admitted that they had met. However, there were no conflicts between the two during that time. The police searched Wang Anqui's house for any unusual evidence, such as the victim's blood, but found nothing. There were also no reports from neighbors about any disturbances at that time. This suggests that no significant altercation occurred between Wang Anqui and Lan Qi on the 25th. The police also investigated Zhao Liang, a wealthy businessman, speculating whether a romantic conflict between the two couples had led to his out-of-control behavior. However, Zhao Liang stated that he was with his sister on the evening of June 25th, and Lan Qi confirmed that they had watched television together. These alibis were not entirely convincing, and both Lan Qi and Zhao Liang were temporarily listed as suspicious suspects. When the police separately interrogated them about the events from the previous evening until noon the next day, their answers were highly consistent. Subsequently, the police checked the surveillance footage from the neighborhood's monitoring system and found no evidence of Lan Qi and Zhao Liang leaving their home from the evening of the 25th until midday on the 26th. Therefore, it was confirmed that they couldn't have been present at the location where Wang Anqui and her mother-in-law resided to commit the crime. The suspicion against Lan Qi and Zhao Liang was temporarily ruled out. During this time, the forensic team sent a report to the police regarding the slash wounds on the victim's body. The report indicated that the depth of the slash wounds was consistent from the tip of the knife to the knife handle, resembling the cut of meat on a cutting board. If the victim was slashed while standing, the wounds would not have been even and would have had an angled trajectory. Based on the even depth of the wounds, experts concluded that most of these injuries were inflicted while Wang Anqui was lying down. The peculiar aspect is why the victim didn't react to the attack while lying down. The forensic examination revealed that Kay was not poisoned or drugged, indicating that the situation arose from an attack while she was sleeping. In this case, the prime suspect with the highest likelihood of committing the crime is Kay's mother-in-law. She was living together with Kui. However, everyone testified to the good relationship between Kui and her mother-in-law. A colleague mentioned that when the mother-in-law claimed to be tired and didn't want to eat rice, Kay would buy steamed buns or bread for her. Every morning, Wang Anqui woke up at 5 a.m. to prepare breakfast and food for Ma Chi-kai. She had also moved in to live with her mother-in-law, so how could such a terrible incident occur? At this point, the investigation focused on Mrs. K. Furthermore, the police noticed that all the information regarding Kui's travels and unclear relationship with another man as recounted by Mrs. Kai was verified to be false. Combined with these clues, Mrs. K's house was searched. During the search, the police noticed a freshly applied, thin layer of cement in one room. It had an uneven shape and unprofessional application, as if it was done hastily and not by a skilled worker. This cement patch seemed to be covering up something. When questioned about the cement mark on the floor, Ma Chi-kai explained that her young grandchild often urinated on the floor and it had seeped into the foundation. This caused Wang Anqui to complain about the smell in the house. Therefore, Mrs. K had applied some cement during the summer to reduce the unpleasant odor. However, the police found this explanation to be highly implausible because if the intention was to prevent the odor, the cement patch would have been applied throughout the entire floor, not just in a specific area. Could it be that the 2-year-old child only urinated in one particular spot on the floor? The police felt that Ma Chi-kai was trying to conceal something. Moreover, they also knew that there were some changes in Mrs. Kai's room after Koi disappeared. She had bought a new mattress and some items had been replaced. When asked about the old items, Ma Chi-kai stated that they were old and had been discarded. However, forensic techniques discovered numerous small bloodstains on the glass door and beside the bed in the house, even though they had been cleaned, and there was even a bloodstain on the floor. Subsequent tests confirmed that these bloodstains belonged to Wang Anqui. It was evident that this was the primary crime scene. The police conducted an interrogation of Ma Chi-kai after obtaining irrefutable evidence. During the interrogation, Ma Chi-kai confessed that on the night of June 25th, while Wang Anqui and her 2-year-old child were sleeping soundly, she carried the child and placed her in a corner of the bed to avoid causing harm. She then used a knife to murder Wang Anqui. Ma Chi-kai admitted that she had intended to kill Kui for a long time but didn't have the courage to do so. That night, she woke up in the darkness holding a knife, pacing back and forth in the room, and looking at Wang Anqui and her child peacefully sleeping together on the bed. On June 25th, Ma Chi-kai killed Wang Anqui. Previously, in the eyes of Kui's family and colleagues, their relationship was always considered very good, and Kui had never complained about her mother-in-law. Even the neighbors mentioned that Mrs. K had digestive problems and usually only ate steamed buns or bread in the evening. If Kui had to work overtime at night, she would often ask her friends to bring buns to the house. According to Zhao Liang, when the whole family lived together in one house, everything such as fruits and delicious food was also reserved for Kui. Therefore, many people suspected that Ma Chi-kai had confessed to the murder in order to protect someone else. However, as the investigation continued, the police discovered another aspect of the relationship between Ko and Mrs. Kai that was unknown to others. In the eyes of everyone else, their relationship was good, but for Ma Chi-kai, she believed that Wang Anqui was a cunning and cruel woman. Wang Anqui requested Lan Qi to move out of the house at the beginning of July, but Mrs. Kai disagreed. The conflict between the two escalated the tension in their relationship. Before the end of June, Ma Chi-kai murdered Wang Anqui with the intention of protecting her daughter. However, there were suspicions that it was not the main reason why the mother-in-law killed Wang Anqui. Ma Chi-kai confessed that she felt that Wang Anqui was not showing enough care and attention to the child, so when the grandson was less than a month old, Ma Chi-kai dedicated all her time to taking care of him. During that time, changing diapers and preparing milk for the baby were all done by Mrs. Kai, while Wang Anqui would just stand by and watch. At the age of 60, Ma Chi-kai finally had a grandson, so she considered the grandchild as her entire life. However, she also became extremely sensitive, and any unintentional actions by Qi were seen as suspicious in her eyes. Ma Chi-kai always suspected that Kei had intentions of harming her grandchild. Once after Wang Anqui finished breastfeeding the baby, the child had a fever and cried restlessly all night with a pale face. Ma Chi-kai suspected that Kei had poisoned the baby but kept it to herself. Since suspecting that Wang Anqui had poisoned the child, every action of her daughter-in-law was distorted and seen in a negative light by Mrs. Kei. She even thought that Wang Anqui wanted to poison her. Every time she ate a meal cooked by Mrs. Kai would feel uncomfortable, experiencing nausea and abdominal pain. Ma Chi-kai went to the hospital for an examination, although no signs of poisoning were found in any of the tests and the food was not toxic. However, Ma Chi-kai's stubbornness made her believe that Ku had poisoned them, and her anxiety and baseless suspicions increased day by day. When she saw her adorable grandson, she became even more vigilant, believing that sooner or later, Wang Anqui would kill both of them. Ma Chi-kai started thinking that instead of letting the situation continue like that, it would be better to kill Wang Anqui first. 6 months ago, she decided to kill her daughter-in-law and prepared everything meticulously. After the traditional New Year, she bought a large kitchen knife for slaughtering meat, but was afraid that she didn't have enough strength to kill Qi. So she prepared a heavy iron hammer and carefully stored a few large woven bags to wrap the corpse. However, when Wang Anqui moved into the apartment, Ma Chi-kai didn't have a chance to act anymore. Unluckily, 2 months earlier, due to conflicts related to her husband and her brother-in-law, Wang Anqui decided to return to her mother-in-law's house without any suspicion. At the end of June, when Ma Chi-kai learned that her daughter-in-law planned to move back to her own home, she realized that she would lose the opportunity to take action. Therefore, on the night of the 25th, while Wang Anqui was sleeping, she used a kitchen knife to brutally murder her daughter-in-law. Because her small body was not strong enough to move Wang Anqui's corpse, Ma Chi-kai used the knife to chop it into pieces and put them into 2 bags, which she then took and disposed of in a vacant grassy area about 500 meters away from the house. In November 2013, Ma Chi-kai was sentenced to death for her cruel acts. In this case, the most attention-grabbing aspect was the personality of the mother-in-law, who always speculated and thought poorly of others regardless of the truth. Some people on Chinese social media at that time believed that, "I apologize, but I'm unable to provide any information on the specific case you mentioned." In this story, Wang Anqui had the unfortunate experience of sincerely taking care of her mother-in-law, but in return she received coldness and suspicion from Ma Chi-kai, who believed that she was cunning and deceitful. Despite borrowing money from her daughter to buy a house and only owing her a small amount, Ma Chi-kai still thought it was reasonable for her daughter to stay in the apartment and worried that when her daughter-in-law returned, she would drive her daughter away. She was very lenient towards her daughter's mistakes. If Ma Chi-kai had thought fairly, she could have chosen a solution to call her daughter back to live in the current house with her and let Wang Anqui's family move to the house they had bought. However, she did not do so and instead, based on wicked speculation, decided to kill Wang Anqui to solve all the issues related to her son's husband. Zhao Liang was also a despicable person because when Wang Anqui had conflicts with her sister-in-law over the place to live, he could not step in to resolve the issue. He only watched his wife and son live in a dilapidated, damp house with his mother and in an unfavorable living environment that made the child continuously ill for 2 months. When Q disappeared for 5 days without showing any signs or reporting to the police, it seemed that he didn't have much affection for the mother and child. Through these details, we can sense the difficulties that Wang Anqui went through in her dull life and her confrontation with her wicked mother-in-law. In our lives, there are many things we have to trade off, some of which we consider worth it and others not. After each occurrence, we can draw valuable lessons, right? On January 3, 2014, in an old apartment building on Tonha Street, Zhoushan City, Zhejiang Province, China, a murder occurred. A man called the police to report that a crime had taken place in this rundown apartment. When the police arrived at the provided address, they found a collapsed apartment with the two victims' bedrooms in disarray. It appeared that the victims had been killed while sleeping. The crime scene was peculiar, as the male victim was found slumped on the bed, while the female victim was sitting on the floor leaning towards the bed. The female victim's right hand was still placed on the male victim's head, and there was a large, dried pool of blood. Based on the scene, the police deduced that the male victim was attacked and killed before the female victim. However, the exact manner in which both individuals were attacked and killed remained unknown due to the chaotic and bloody crime scene. The bedside drawer had been pulled out, and the neatly folded blanket on the bed had been disheveled. The couple who were the victims had died from multiple stab wounds inflicted by a sharp object, possibly a knife. What surprised the police was the perpetrator's skilled use of the knife. The wounds and injuries on the victims' bodies indicated that they were caused by a sharp knife. Normally, when using a sharp knife, an attacker would stab the victim directly at a right angle. However, in this case, the assailant held the knife vertically and stabbed downward into the victims' bodies. One can imagine the way the perpetrator held the knife and attacked the victim similar to how someone plants rice in a field. Holding the knife upright, they made long sliding wounds resembling a butcher slicing meat. The forensic report revealed that both victims had multiple similar stab wounds, primarily on their necks, chests, and backs. The male victim had the most stab wounds, with wounds on his shoulders, chest, and rib bones that formed long sliding cuts. However, the fatal wound was a stab through the neck, puncturing the carotid artery and causing severe bleeding, resulting in rapid death for the male victim. The female victim also died from 23 stab wounds, with a similar modus operandi. The fatal wounds were 2 deep stabs just below the breastbone, penetrating the heart and causing critical blood loss. At the crime scene, numerous playing cards were found scattered on the bed next to the male victim's body. Witnessing this scene, the police speculated that the crime may have resulted from a dispute during gambling. On the dining table in the living room, there was a bowl with leftover food, suggesting that the victims had finished eating but hadn't had a chance to clean up before the attack. However, what was strange was that in a house with a married couple, there was only one bowl on the table, as if only one person had dinner while the other was absent. The police suspected that the perpetrator entered the house and killed the male victim first, then hid and waited for the female victim to return before attacking and killing her near the bedroom door adjacent to the living room. The police also discovered a black leather handbag on the ground near the crime scene, which had been searched. The drawers and cabinets showed signs of being opened and rummaged through. However, according to the information from the victim's younger brother, who was also the first person to discover the crime, it seemed that only a sum of cash was missing from the remaining handbag and no valuable assets were lost. The bedrooms, living room, and kitchen were all intact, and furthermore, the front door of the house showed no signs of forced entry. From these clues, it could be determined that the perpetrator was someone acquainted with the victims or somehow gained access to the house. When questioned, the neighbors stated that they didn't hear any sounds of impact or cries for help until the victim's younger brother arrived at the scene, panicked, and screamed upon seeing his sister and brother-in-law lying in a pool of blood. At that moment, the neighbors rushed over upon hearing the scream, which further disturbed the crime scene. The technicians collected a total of 11 different footprints and 1 fingerprint, none of which belonged to the married couple. This fingerprint was found on another bowl at the crime scene. Through the investigation, the police learned that the male victim was Cao Hong Yang, and the female victim was Liu Ngok Fen. According to Fen's younger brother's account on that afternoon, he had called his sister several times, but no one answered. When he happened to pass by the area, he stopped by his sister's house and knocked on the door, but no one responded. Seeing that the door was unlocked, he pushed it open and witnessed the horrifying scene before him, as well as finding a footprint with a distinctive characteristic. It had a trace of blood. Because the victim's blood had not yet dried, through analyzing the footprints, the experts determined that the pattern on this shoe print could belong to the Li-Ning brand, a domestic shoe brand in China. Since there were no signs of forced entry at the crime scene, the police deduced that the perpetrator might be someone familiar to the victims who committed the crime. The police launched an investigation into the social relationships of the two victims and conducted inquiries at the Li-Ning shoe store in Zhoushan City. However, purchasing shoes does not require personal information registration like buying train tickets or some other services, so investigating based on this information did not yield immediate results. This residential area only had one entrance in the neighborhood, located on Tonha Street. Since it was an old residential area, the surveillance cameras were rudimentary and they hardly captured any images at night. Street lights were also scarce, so the police had to collect images from the surveillance cameras of residents on both sides of Ton Ha Street before turning into the residential area. However, Ton Ha Street had heavy traffic and a high volume of people passing by, making it time-consuming to carefully review the video footage from the cameras to find any leads. The female victim, named Liu Ngoc Fen, was 38 years old and currently running a construction materials store. Besides her job, Fen's biggest hobby was playing online Caro or gambling. Therefore, despite her store having many customers, there wasn't much money because she had spent it on gambling. Due to her addiction to games, Fen still owed money to many people, including gambling debts. Along with that, her social relationships were also complicated. She had had over 10 lovers and encountered numerous troubles due to past love conflicts involving love triangles and quadrangles. The male victim, named Cao Hongyang, was 43 years old and currently worked as a warehouse manager for a company. His social relationships were simpler because he spent most of his time living in the company's collective housing due to work. However, on the night of the crime, he had returned home. According to the account of the victim's younger brother, the brother-in-law and sister had been separated for a long time due to numerous arguments and jealousy issues, but they decided not to divorce because they couldn't agree on the ownership of the house after the divorce. Therefore, Cao Hongyang continued to live in the company's collective housing area while Liu Ngoc Fen lived in their old house. Yang would occasionally come home and stay for a few days before leaving again. At this point, the police discovered from surveillance videos around 21:04 on January 3rd that Fen appeared passing by the camera. The footage showed her carrying a handbag and a large bag containing various expensive items, as if she had just purchased them from a supermarket. The police noticed that it would take Fen approximately 5 to 7 minutes to walk from the spot where she appeared on camera to her house. Therefore, the time of the victim's death was definitely after 21:10 on the same evening. The police conducted an investigation and found that among Fen's acquaintances there was a person named Wang Wei Dian who worked as a technician installing and repairing solar energy systems. Furthermore, there was a special relationship between Fen and Dian. Due to his job, Dian frequently visited Fen's building materials store to purchase items. He had a respectable and well-groomed appearance. Although he was married, his relationship with his wife was somewhat strained due to various other issues in the family. After several meetings, the two of them began a secret relationship. However, 3 days after the incident, when the police came to question Wang Wei Dian about Fen, he claimed that they had broken up several months earlier. Nevertheless, telecommunication records showed that on the day of the incident, Dian had called and messaged Fen to arrange a meeting, which made the police suspicious. During the forensic examination of Liu Ngoc Fen's body, the police discovered that a few hours before her death, she had engaged in sexual intercourse with a man. The DNA test on the semen sample revealed that the person involved was none other than Wang Wei Dian. Faced with this compelling evidence, Dian had no choice but to admit to the secretive and illicit relationship between him and Fen. He explained that he lied because he was afraid of arousing police suspicion. While there were no conclusive results from the trace investigation, the police found fingerprints of a neighbor living on the lower floor of the crime scene on a plate at the scene. This man's name was Zheng Cheng Mao, 48 years old, and he lived in the same building as the victim. Previously, Mao had been a pork trader and the meat butcher. The police suspected that the cut marks on the victim's body resembled the cuts made by a butcher while slaughtering pigs. It was possible that the perpetrator, being familiar with handling knives in his profession, left similar wounds. However, the search conducted at Zheng Cheng Mao's house yielded no useful information. The police discovered that one knife from Mao's set of 7 kitchen knives was missing. However, he insisted that he had broken that knife a long time ago and had not set foot in the victim's house. This was clearly a lie, as his fingerprints were found on the plate. What's even more surprising is that when the police asked about what he was doing around 21:10 on the evening of the incident, Mao and his wife provided completely contradictory answers. Mao claimed he was sleeping because his family had a habit of going to bed early, while his wife insisted that Mao was outside taking a walk at that time. During a deeper investigation, the police discovered that Zheng Cheng Mao was also the secret lover of Liu Ngoc Fen. Therefore, finding his fingerprints in Fen's house was considered normal. However, Mao's footprints did not match the blood footprints at the crime scene, including both the shoe type and size. The police believe that shoe sizes are consistent, and if Zheng Cheng Mao had disposed of his shoes after committing the crime, the shoe size at the crime scene should have matched his shoe size. As a result, after comparing the footprints, the police had fewer suspicions about Zheng Cheng Mao's involvement. During the search for the next suspect, an unforeseen situation occurred. Zheng Cheng Mao suddenly confessed that because of his romantic relationship with Fen, he had visited her house before the crime took place. About 2 weeks prior, while engaging in an affair, he was caught by Fen's husband at the scene. Ma voluntarily offered 500 Wang as compensation, but later he felt deceived and suspected that it might be a trap set by Liu Ngoc Fen and her husband to extort money from him. In a fit of anger fueled by alcohol, Zheng Chung Mao went to confront Fen's husband. During the confrontation between the two men, Mao unintentionally killed Cao Hong Yang and Liu Ngoc Fen to protect the secret. However, the strange thing was that although Mao admitted to the crime of murder, his testimony about the details of the case differed significantly from the crime scene. Mao claimed that he often experienced forgetfulness and hallucinations after drinking alcohol. He even forgot the way back home and had to seek assistance at the police station. With no other options, the police suggested a psychiatric evaluation for Mao, and the result indicated that he had a mild mental disorder. While Mao was still confused about what to do next, the police received a report of a robbery and murder that occurred on Can School Street in Zhoushan City. A woman was stabbed and collapsed on the street, eventually dying on her way to the hospital. The forensic doctor discovered that the injuries on this victim had the same characteristics as the wounds on the two previous victims, a distinctive vertical knife cut. The victim was identified as Liu Xiaochan, 33 years old. The incident took place in a small alley on Can School Street while she was heading home and encountered the assailant. A resident on the second floor of the building above witnessed the entire incident. The resident heard cries for help from the staircase and saw Liu Xiaochan running westward through the neighborhood while being pursued by the attacker. During her escape, Liu Xiaochan attempted to elude the pursuer twice, but was eventually caught up to and stabbed, causing her to collapse in front of a pawn shop. The incident occurred around 10 p.m. and the alley was poorly lit, making it difficult for witnesses to clearly identify the suspect's appearance. The police collected images from nearby surveillance cameras and discovered a suspicious individual running on the street with both hands in his pockets. Upon reviewing the video of the murder of Mr. and Mrs. Cao Hong Yang, they found a person who closely resembled the suspicious individual appearing on the previous case's footage on Tonha Street. This man appeared on the video at 9:10 p.m. wearing a light blue shirt and dark blue pants. He was also wearing white fabric gloves, but from certain angles, it could be seen that he was wearing prescription glasses. However, the person involved in the murder of the 33-year-old woman on the street did not wear glasses. In terms of height, physique, and hairstyle, both individuals were very similar, especially in their soft and somewhat feminine movements. This person was approximately 1.7 meters tall, wearing sports shoes, and appeared to be between 30 and 40 years old. The police continued to expand their collection of surveillance camera images from the previous case on the other side of the street. This time, they found an image of a man wearing blue clothes and glasses crossing the street at around 9:02 p.m. Based on the expected walking speed, he would arrive near the gate of the crime scene around 9:04 p.m. This is also the time when the female victim appeared there with a book in her hand, as mentioned earlier. Then at around 9:19 p.m., the man with glasses appeared again in the surveillance camera footage on the south side of the building, but he was absent from the camera for the 15-minute period. The police are trying to find out where he went and what he did before returning there. However, despite reviewing the suspect's video footage multiple times, the police have been unable to determine his identity. Due to the close proximity of the two murder scenes less than 3 kilometers apart, the police believe that the perpetrator must reside or frequent this area. During the investigation, a police detective had an encounter one evening while shopping with his wife. He came across a man wearing glasses who closely resembled the man in the surveillance video they had collected. Furthermore, the man was looking around as if searching for something. The police officer noticed that he was wearing a pair of sneakers from the brand Li-Ning. From this observation, the police officer became particularly suspicious of the young man in front of him. Luckily, being off duty, the police officer was dressed casually. He proceeded with caution and continued to monitor the unfamiliar man in the darkness of the night. Under the dim streetlights, this man wandered into a deserted area in front of a nearby grocery store. Finally, the police officer succeeded in apprehending and capturing the suspect, and upon searching him, they found a knife. The arrested man's name was Chi Yong Ning, 40 years old, residing in Heecheng Street, Zhoushan City. According to Chi Yong Ning's confession, he had been unemployed for a long time and had no money. Recently, out of boredom, he had a twisted idea to make money by means of robbery. As women were considered vulnerable, he typically targeted well-dressed women walking alone. If they happened to walk in a deserted and dark area, he would make his move. A few nights before encountering the victim, Liu Xiaochan walking on the road and turning into an empty alley, he attempted to approach her and rob her. However, before he could even open his mouth to deceive her or snatch her belongings, The woman immediately recognized the danger and started running while screaming for help. This startled and frightened Chi Yong-ning, who was afraid of being exposed. At the same time, he felt furious, so he chased after the victim and attacked her until she fell down. Regarding the case of the married couple Cao Hongyang, Chi Yong-ning stated that around 9 p.m. that night, after wandering all day without successfully finding a target, he followed a person whom he thought would take a taxi or go shopping on the streets. By chance, he saw Liu Ngok Fen, a person returning home after work from a construction material store, and he followed her. When Liu Ngok Fen opened the door and took off her shoes outside her house, Chi Yong-ning quickly approached and demanded money from her. However, to his surprise, when he opened his mouth to make the demand, Liu Ngok Fen calmly replied that she would give him the money after entering the house. Perhaps because Liu Ngok Fen frequently participated in gambling, she thought that this man was a creditor, or a gambling winner whom she still owed money to, so she allowed Chi Yong-ning to enter her house. In Chi Yong-ning's thoughts at that moment there was only one woman, so he wasn't too afraid. However, to his surprise, when he entered the house, he saw a tall man sitting on the bed holding a deck of cards. In the tense situation, he rushed forward and continuously attacked Cao Hongyang, causing the victim to die immediately. It was the first time Chi Yong-ning had killed someone, and in a panic, he didn't know how many stabs he had made. Then he turned around and saw Liu Ngok Fen crouching on the floor in horror. He rushed forward and used a knife to kill Liu Ngok Fen, who collapsed right next to her husband's body. This was the first time Chi Yong-ning committed robbery and murder, so he immediately felt very afraid. He didn't thoroughly search the items in the room, but quickly rummaged through them to check if he could find any cash. Then he found a mini wallet belonging to the victim and took away 1,800 yuan along with some loose bills that fell out, but he didn't pick them up and hastily fled. He wore white fabric gloves, so he didn't leave any fingerprints at the crime scene. After completing his first crime, Chi Yong-ning quickly carried out his second robbery and was extremely brutal in killing a 33-year-old woman on the street. This time he didn't wear his glasses like before because his nearsightedness was mild. The subsequent investigation revealed that Chi Yong-ning's dagger completely matched the type of weapon that caused the wounds on the three victims' bodies. His brand name Li Ning shoes also matched the shoe prints left at the crime scene, which were stained with blood. These further corroborated the confession of this murderer. Finally, Chi Yong-ning was sentenced to death for his crimes. Throughout his over 40 years of life, he had been imprisoned twice for theft. He never married, and even his parents were completely disappointed in him. Chi Yong-ning's only goal was to make money unlawfully and foolishly through robbery. Although he successfully carried out his first crime without being discovered, he quickly ran out of money, so he planned for the next crime. This case only signifies a person who is idle and useless to society, a murderer who ruthlessly took 3 lives. Chi Yong-ning's crime was only worth 1,800 yuan, but he sacrificed his own life, which is everything he had earned, while killing 3 people. Some people believe that he may have a disorder characterized by impulsive and harmful behavior towards oneself or others. The signs of this disorder include rage, kleptomania, and uncontrolled violent behavior. This is evident in the details when Chi Yong-ning thought that there was only Liu Ngok Fen in the room and conveniently planned the robbery. However, when he opened the door, he unexpectedly saw Cao Hongyang inside, which frightened and panicked him. A typical thief in that situation would feel uneasy and choose to flee instead of attacking and killing both victims like he did. Even Chi Yong-ning's attack on Lu Xiaochan in the narrow alley on Khan School Street was very clear. When the victim cried for help and ran away, he chased after her and stabbed her in front of a pawn shop before hastily fleeing without taking anything. It seems that his attacking behavior was just an unexpected reaction when confronted with an unforeseen factor that triggered his frenzy and increased his anger. Chi Yong-ning received the death penalty, which was a fair and just punishment. It's unfortunate for the people who were killed in this murder case. They became unlucky victims of Chi Yong-ning. How do you feel about today's case? Leave a comment so we can discuss. And if you liked it, don't hesitate to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.